How do you deal with unreasonable tenants if you're a real estate investor? That's going to be the topic of today's podcast on the Real Estate Investing Fast Track and my YouTube channel, Greg Helbeck Real Estate Investing. If you're not familiar with me, I've been a full-time entrepreneur now for almost 10 years. The only business I've ever done is buying, selling, and renting real estate. So all the information you're going to hear on this show is going to be real-world practical advice. This is not regurgitated theory out of a book. So if you get value from today's show, do me a favor. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to my channel, like the video. Would really mean a lot to me. And if you're listening to this on an audio platform, if you could share the show with other people, that's how we keep growing the show. So how do you deal with an unreasonable tenant? Now, if you are a wholesaler, if you're a flipper, obviously, if you're a landlord, you're going to run into this situation. You're going to have sellers who are trying to sell you properties that have unreasonable tenants. You're going to own rentals, and all of a sudden your tenants might become unreasonable. You're going to buy a property if you're a flipper with maybe an unreasonable tenant inside that you have to deal with. So this is going to be just practical advice on how you figure this out. Now, the first step to dealing with an unreasonable tenant is you got to figure out what is the objective for the tenant. Why are they being unreasonable? Usually, it's one of a few things. Number one, they're pissed off at the landlord that they had before you came into the picture. They're not great landlords. They're not professional. They don't understand what they're doing. And they piss their tenant off, and now their tenant all of a sudden becomes hostile. The second thing that you see with tenants is that they have an entitlement mindset. They feel like, they can somehow live for free, or they're entitled to no rent, or the world's out there to get them, or something crazy like that. The third thing that you see with an unreasonable tenant is that they are just in denial that they might have to move, right? They just figure they might as well sabotage themselves and try to burn the boats down. So you got to figure out their objective and understand the angle. So I'll give you a good example. There's a property right now out here in Washington that I'm involved in. And I wouldn't call them tenants, but basically squatters. And they don't even want to consider getting bought out. They just want to take the whole thing through the finish line. They want to go through the court system. They feel like they're entitled to live there for whatever reason, even though they never had a lease. And in that situation, it's very, very hard to try to work something out with them from a, cash for keys situation. So anyway, once you figure out what the tenant's objective is, you want to communicate with them, or you want to have your attorney communicate with them, and you want to approach them not like a savage. And this is where I have made mistakes in the past, where I was very aggressive with non-paying tenants or unreasonable tenants, and I pissed them off. And ultimately, the whole entire landlord-tenant relationship or squatter-landlord relationship just went down the tubes. So approach them with respect. You got to be reasonable with them. You don't want to act like you're the big bad landlord, or you're the guy who owns the house now, because they don't care about that. They're probably pissed off that you own the house, right? So I'll give you a good example on this. I bought a property like 3 months ago, and there were some unreasonable tenants in the property, and they had the entitlement mindset, and they were also pissed off that they had to leave. And I understand why they were upset. It was a total understandable situation. And, it was not an easy conversation to have with these people, but I basically told them that they're going to have to leave this property, right? Like one way or the other, they're going to have to leave. And they were trying to tell me they were going to squat. And I said, that probably wasn't the best idea. So what I did, instead of me like yelling at them, I was like, I get it. You feel like you're entitled to live here. It makes sense. You've been here for a while. If you did squat, in the short term, sure, that would work out. But in the long term, it really wouldn't make sense for anybody. So I don't think that's the best option. And I was just very logical with them. Long story short, we ended up agreeing to give them some money to leave. And we gave a pretty considerable amount of money. And we treated them with respect, and they ended up leaving, and the whole thing worked out. So you got to approach these people the right way. Like the first rental I ever bought back in 2020, I thought I was a cowboy savage. And I walked into the property, and I thought I was the cool landlord in town, even though that was the first rental I ever bought. And it just pissed them off, and I actually had them in my property for years. They finally got out this year, and the whole relationship was just a disaster. I think they were unreasonable people to begin with, and I happened to not be the best communicator with them, so I think that was a recipe to have people be upset. But I could have done better, right? I could have done better. And if I did better, I might have gotten a better outcome. So anyway, the third thing when you're dealing with an unreasonable tenant is you got to emotionally remove yourself from the situation, assuming you're doing an eviction or you have to get an attorney involved. So something that really bothered me as a landlord that I've had to overcome, and I'm working on to this day, is I tend sometimes to get emotionally involved with the tenants. And I'm pissed off that they're not complying, or they're not paying their rent, or maybe I bought the property, there's a tenant inside and they're not willing to leave. You have to remove yourself from the emotions of that and just follow a plan of legal action if you're going to have to kick a squatter out. You get an attorney, You go over all the steps to get them out, and you just pretend like you don't even have the house. You pay the bills, you pay the mortgage, you pay the HOA if it's a condo, and you just have the attorney deal with it. Because what that will do is it will just give you more energy to do more deals, right? If you're caught up with a bad tenant, it's just going to be a waste of time. So one more example, and then I'll start to summarize this video. I bought another rental. I think this was my second rental I ever bought. Bad tenants, surprise, surprise. And originally, we got them to pay some rent. They weren't paying market rent, but they were paying some rent. And this was in the middle of COVID, so I couldn't even do an eviction. And I don't think it was right to do an eviction. So anyway, we agreed that they were going to give me some money. They paid me rent for like 8 months. And then I told them like, hey, I got to refinance and the rent's going to have to go up a little bit. And they were pissed off. And then we ended up getting this whole pissing match and they stopped paying and ended up evicting them, right? Ended up evicting them. And it was a total circus. But I, at that point, got very emotionally involved with the attorney, with the tenants. And I was like, why act like that? I should have just literally been logical and said, okay, you know, no problem, get the attorney involved. And it took like years to get these people out. And it was just such a stupid idea by me getting emotionally involved, and it was a waste of time. So if you're in this business for more than, a couple months, you're probably going to deal with this, especially if you're wholesaling, right? I've seen this with wholesale deals where there's a tenant inside and maybe the end buyer only wants to buy it if it's vacant. You got to work with the tenant. So you're going to see this no matter what you're doing in real estate. Even if you're a real estate agent, you're probably going to see this. So in summary, you need to, number one, understand the tenant's psychology and really what's their objective. Do they want to get paid to leave? Do they want to try to sabotage the whole freaking thing and get thrown out by the sheriff? Number two, treat these people with respect and communicate with them in a professional manner and don't act like a savage, because that is just going to blow your situation up and it's going to be a lot harder to get them out. And number three, you got to emotionally remove yourself from the situation. And if it is an eviction or you're dealing with a squatter, my advice is to hire a really good attorney who specializes in that, pay them a really good fee or whatever they're going to charge. Don't argue about the price, and have that attorney work to get them out. So those are my steps on how you would deal with unreasonable tenants. I do this all the time. And if you have a property and maybe there's an unreasonable tenant inside and you're a wholesaler, or just if you have a deal in general and you want to wholesale it to me, I am a legitimate buyer. Or if you want to wholesale it with me, I got great buyers lists. Love to JV with you. So if you got something I'd be interested in, send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com, or you can send me a message on Instagram @grego37. I'll see you on the next video. Take care. Bye.